the first thing I want to do, excuse me, is really talk about the, okay, yeah, good, the slides are popping up. Really, how do they move through this process? So there are two really main components. That's admissions type. It depends on the school's admissions type. And then their acceptance profile, which is really important. In the course, I have a link, and I'm going to share a page and show you some ways you can use a website to dig a little bit deeper to find out what the school's acceptance profile is, so that as you are working on your grades, working on your test scores, working on all those pieces of who you are, you know just what you need to do in order to be a little bit more competitive or a little bit more desirable to a particular school. So you have a very specific target. So the admissions types are really what makes the school selective in terms of who they admit into their program or into their college or university. And so when we think of selective, if schools have less than, on average, it's considered like less than 30% acceptance rate, they're considered selective. And then of course there are highly selective schools. And then there are schools that are moderately selective and schools that are not very selective. And it's not that they're not selective, it's just that they have more of what's called an open enrollment process. So they're a little bit more open. When it comes to selectivity, some schools have opted out of this process in terms of ranking themselves in terms of test scores and grade point averages. And that's a whole cohort of schools called Colleges That Change Lives. And it's an organization. And there are schools all throughout the US that said, you know, we do a full holistic review. And if you want to submit test scores, if you feel like they reflect, you know, kind of your ability and who you are, or, you know, all the other pieces, then go ahead and do that. Now, of course, again, this year we've got kind of COVID on the surface, or kind of bubbling under the surface. And so many schools have gone test optional, but not for the same reasons that schools that are either test optional or schools that are in the Colleges That Change Lives organization, not for those same reasons, very different reasons, okay? So one is because there's a global pandemic and students just simply, many students could not sit for the test. And the other is this is just a part of their core philosophy. It's who they are. Yeah, so that's pretty much with selectivity. Now it's kind of a, I don't say a tricky number, but what tends to happen, the more selective a school is, the more students want to apply to it. And, you know, they only have so many seats. So I'm going to use really even numbers. Let's say a school only has 100 seats. You know, they can only accept 100 incoming freshmen. And maybe 2 years prior, 1,000 students applied for those 100 seats. So then you can begin to see what that percentage is, right? Then that makes their number, it looks really good. That's called yield, the amount of students that were accepted for their seats. Then students see that and they're like, whoa, that's a very selective program. Look at their numbers. They're, you know, only like 10% of their students get accepted, right? And then that next year, maybe 2,000 students or 5,000 students now apply for those same 100 seats. And so their yield, you know, shrinks and shrinks and shrinks, making them look more desirable, making them look more selective. So it's kind of a false, or it can be a false metric. And that's why I want to caution you when it comes to just simply looking at rankings and numbers. Really study the program. What is it about this program that's good for you? It has to be kind of mutual. And we've done all of that, you know, in a few modules back, a few weeks back. But now this is more, once you've identified this program or this school, you know, what are they looking for in terms of you? So I wanted you to understand the admissions type. Now with the acceptance profile, let me see, let me pull the chat up here just in case I get any chats. Okay, with the acceptance profile, there are 16 factors that schools take a look at, and some are more important to some schools, some are, you know, other things are more important to others. But when you understand what they're looking for very specifically, and I'll show you that towards the end, it makes it really easy to know what you need to work on if you've got time, okay? So some, of course, every school is going to look at your grade point average because they want to make sure you can handle the rigor of a college load, you know. So they're looking at the grade point average, some maybe test scores, some are looking at maybe if you've taken AP exams or you're in AP classes. Some want to know how well did you do on those scores, or maybe the SAT subject test, things like that. Then the state or the region where you live, there are some schools that really heavily recruit from a region, or if a school wants to broaden their geographical, where their students come from, then you being from outside of an area, you know, where they tend to just kind of enroll students from may be more desirable. So that criteria, that acceptance profile piece may work to your advantage in terms of what that particular school looks for. Then they offer the majors offered. Also, the deadline's very important because, again, when students are applying early action, early decision. So let me make sure I explain it too, because I never want to assume everybody understands. But early decision is binding. You sign a contract, and it means that if you get accepted, you are withdrawing every application from every other school, and that's where you're going. And I always caution students when it comes to early decision. If you are comfortable with the numbers, whatever your aid package looks like or doesn't look like, and then choose that route. But some schools also offer what's called early action. And early action gives you an earlier acceptance decision, and we're going to talk about decisions at the end, one of several options, but it's not binding. You don't have to commit to that school. So you can continue to apply. You can continue to wait to hear back from other schools. You're not withdrawing all of your other applications. So those deadlines are part of their profile. And then expanding or new programs. And sometimes we don't know what that is, when you're applying, because they're what's called institutional priorities. So if they know they just received a heavy endowment for, let's say, the nursing program, and they really want to build that program, then they may offer more scholarships to students who want to be nurses. So sometimes, but sometimes you may read an article or, check out something on their Twitter page, or, you may see something where you see an endowment or you see they're building new buildings, things like that. Those are good clues that they're expanding this program. They're expanding their engineering department. They're expanding their business department, or they're adding more concentrations or minors or whatever. So those are good ways to kind of get a feel for some of that as well.